Fact check: Biden's latest false statistical claims. President Joe Biden made another series of inaccurate claims in his economics speech. In late January, CNN examined Biden's false and misleading claims in a business speech to union members in Virginia. It repeated one and released 3 other false statements. It's all about statistics. Trump and bonds. In a speech Wednesday, Biden criticized former President Donald Trump's fiscal policies. After correctly pointing out that the federal budget deficit has grown each year during Trump's presidency, Biden said, "And because of these record deficits, no president has increased the national debt further. No. This is 200 years of debt, more national debt than my predecessor." This claim is false. His 8 years as President Barack Obama and Vice President Biden added more debt than his 4 years as Trump. The Trump era set a record for debt added in one 4-year presidential term, but Biden here sounded like the Trump era set a record. Biden correctly said in his State of the Union address last week that he was referring to a 4-year added debt record. Both deficits were lower than those in the Obama administration's first term, when the country emerged from a major recession and President Obama approved several measures to increase the deficit. There are several ways to measure liability. Using the basic headline total national debt, the debt increased from about $10.6 trillion on the day of his inauguration in 2009 to about $19.9 trillion on Trump's inauguration day in 2017, to about $9.3 trillion in Obama's 8 years. Dollar increased. When Biden replaces him in 2021, Trump's 4 years will be about $7.8 trillion and about $27.8 trillion. It is also important to note that it is an oversimplification to hold the president solely responsible for debt incurred during his term of office. The high spending under the president is out of his control, including decisions made by his predecessors decades ago, including the creation of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and the recession inherited by President Obama and the United States. Result of the situation: Trump's global COVID-19 pandemic. Some debt can be attributed to a single party, but Trump's 2017 tax cuts, which were unanimously rejected by congressional Democrats, were a major contributor. Other debt is bipartisan. Debt soared in 2020 after President Trump approved spending trillions of dollars in emergency aid for the pandemic. Mr. Biden was right when he said the deficit was growing every year under Trump. But his fiscal 2017, 2018 and 2019 deficits under Trump are all below his $1 trillion, and below his 2009, 2010, 2011 and 2012 deficits under Obama and Biden. The budget deficit then nearly tripled in his 2020 fiscal year during the pandemic, reaching a record level of about $3.1 trillion. Biden and Treasuries. In another part of his speech, Mr. Biden said he had reduced debt by $1.7 billion in the last 2 years, and the White House revised the official record to $1.7 trillion instead of betting $1.7 billion. First facts. Even ignoring Biden's $1 billion versus $1 trillion mix-up, this claim is inaccurate. The national debt continues to rise under the Biden administration. It was the deficit that fell by about $1.7 trillion, and experts say Biden's acknowledgement of that decline is misleading. Debt increased by about $3.7 trillion to about $31.5 trillion during Biden's presidency. Just as Biden did in his 2022 midterm election speech, his argument in that speech was to turn the debt, the accumulation of federal bonds and unpaid interest, into the deficit. The difference between his spending and income was confused with the deficit fell by about $1.7 trillion from about $3.1 trillion to about $1.4 trillion from FY 2020 to FY 2022. But as CNN has repeatedly pointed out, it's highly questionable how much credit Biden puts in this decline. Instead of reducing the deficit, it says it has significantly increased its current and future deficits. See here and here for more information. Medicare and the Inflation Reduction Act. Biden has made confusing comments about prescription drug costs and the anti-inflation bill he signed last year. He said the law would save seniors a lot of money on prescription drugs, and then said that by cutting the cost of these drugs, the law would reduce the federal deficit and save taxpayers a few dollars. It will save $100 billion, he added. Both claims are valid. But then Biden added that if Republicans repeal that law, there would be no $159,000 annual savings from cutting drug costs. Here's a more complete quote. Now our Republican friends want to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. We're going to lose savings on prescription drugs to buy like Medicare. So we buy through Medicare. And with current drug cost cuts, you're going to lose $159,000 in annual savings. Well, that means your tax dollars saved. Do what we do now so you're saving $159,000. First facts. The Inflation Mitigation Act does not provide for annual savings of $159,000 from reduced drug costs. A White House official told CNN Thursday that if Republicans rescind two key provisions of his Inflation Cuts Act on prescription drugs, Biden could save $159 billion in federal savings over a decade. He said he was trying to say it would be lost. On one side, Biden's $159,000 a year figure greatly underestimated the combined savings from those two provisions. One allows Medicare to negotiate the price of certain prescription drugs, and the other requires pharmaceutical companies to pay Medicare rebates for price increases that exceed inflation. It's more about saving for certain seniors and families than modest savings for the government. And his character, regardless of how it was perceived, was fake. The White House amended that portion of the speech's official record after CNN asked for the figure of $159,000. Billionaires and taxes. Biden repeated inaccurate numbers he used in a speech in Virginia in late January. He said of the American billionaire, "Do you know the average tax they pay? About 3%. First facts. Again, Biden's 3% claim is wrong. Biden said in his 2021 report by economists in his administration that between 2010 and 2018, the 400 richest billionaire families paid an average of 8.2% of their income in state personal income taxes. He incorrectly described the findings 3 times in less than a month. After CNN inquired about Biden's 3% claim in a speech in late January, the White House released a revised transcript of that speech, instead calling it 8%. It is also important to note that even the 8% figure is debatable, as it is a separate calculation that includes unrealized capital gains that are not treated as taxable income. Biden's numbers are too low, Howard Gleckman, a senior fellow at the Urban Institute's Urban Brookings Center for Tax Policy, told CNN in late January. Gleckman wrote in an email. In 2019, Berkeley economists Emmanuel Saez and Gabe Zucman estimated that the average effective tax rate paid by 400 large households in 2018 was about 23%. It got a lot of attention at the time because it was below the bottom half average rate of 24%, but it was still well above 2, 3 or 8%. Biden has cited his 8% statistic in various other speeches, but explained that unlike the administrative economist who invented it, it doesn't explain tax rates in the traditional way. Do not tend to. And independently, he said 3% in that speech and in the Virginia speech, and 2% in another speech in January.